Hey, you know what's kind of messed up?
What's messed up?
We finally have an American Grand Prix during our time, and we have both planned the most intricate vacations of our lives. So
Yeah.
let's talk about this British car company. All right, guys, welcome back. This is episode 11 of Break Check. No race to recap right now, but we are going to be doing another one of our kind of team summary, team history episodes. We're going to be covering Aston Martin today. Before we get into that, as always, please, if you have not already, please subscribe on YouTube, all 6 of you. Follow on Spotify, hit the bell on YouTube, all the different engagement tactics. We really appreciate it. It means a lot to us as we try and, get this thing rolling. And you know what? It doesn't feel like we're 11 episodes in. It feels like we just kind of started, but we're really into it. So it's been really cool. We're coming to you at 7 a.m. Pretty early, not super early, but like early enough.
Yeah.
I slept in. Megan's basement flooded, so we're all just a little
Things
we're
are
a
great.
little out of sorts. Yeah, Megan, how's it going over there underwater?
It's great. We have probably 5 or 7 different fans, like machine grade fans downstairs right now because we finally got the carpet out and some of the paneling out. Fun fact, if you have paneling in your basement, like most Wisconsin homes do, the nice like wood paneling, always check for water damage if you've ever had your basement flood because there could be water hidden under that. I have learned that recently. So, but
See, Mexicans don't fix their basement. That's why.
yeah, we just kind of cover things up. So,
Mhm.
but I
We
go to LA.
actually. Oh,
Oops,
go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead. No.
I was just saying I go to LA tomorrow, so I'm just looking forward to some sunshine and dry air.
Yeah. Similarly, I'm going to Detroit in an hour. Uh,
In an hour.
yes, our friend Quaid, he's getting a tattoo in Detroit and he asked me to come with, so I'm going with. I'm going to be working from his car, and then I'm going to get I'm going to find a Detroit coffee shop, work from there. But actually my basement flooded probably like 15-12 years ago, and we actually lost all of my baby pictures.
No, all of
Yes,
them?
almost all of them. There's like 4 or 5 baby pictures of me like that we still have around, but we lost almost all my baby
Dude,
pictures.
that's so sad. I'm so
And like,
sorry.
yeah, and like obviously people like obviously technology is such a big part of our lives now that
Yeah.
people forget that, like, I don't know, me and Megan are from like a time before like digitalization, so all my baby pictures were like physical paper copies.
Just one
So
copy.
yeah, so I feel you on the basement flooding.
Oh,
At the
damn.
time, I was like, I don't know, maybe like 10, and I didn't care. But now it's like, oh man, I wish I had those pictures. um, but yeah, so Aston Martin, that's our team that we're covering right now. Sebastian Vettel, Lance Stroll. I did Lance Stroll. I hope I was
Yeah.
supposed to do Lance Stroll.
Yes, you did.
Oh,
Yes,
thank
that's
God.
great.
All right.
That would have been very, very short podcast today otherwise.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm gonna be covering Lance Stroll. Megan's gonna be doing Sebastian Vettel. I'll go through a little bit of the team history for Aston Martin, which is not as rich as a lot of these other teams because they are generally a newer team, but they did have an interesting kind of attempt into F1 way back in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I feel like that team's evolved quite a bit just because it keeps getting bought by different people and etc. But I also want to give a shout out to Juan for doing the research this week.
For
It's
once in my
obviously
life.
I was dealing with other things and he did it. So he's gonna take that away for the most part and I'll just be here for the vibes.
And I happily obliged because I really like Aston Martin. Like, as a brand, I'm a very, very big fan of them. So this is pretty cool for me to go back and see. But yeah, we can get started. Before we get into the Aston Martin F1 team, just generally, Aston Martin, the brand, they are a British luxury sports car manufacturer. And they also they specialize in what are called grand touring cars. So like they're meant to drive fast and over a long distance. So they were founded in 1913. And I think what most people know about the brand, just generally the most, where a lot of people in America especially know them, is it is the car that James Bond drives. So in 1964, the movie Goldfinger came out, which is the first James Bond movie, I believe. And James Bond drives the DB5 model in the movie. And what was actually cool, the most recent James Bond movie, No Time to Die, no spoiler, he dies.
No spoilers, but the biggest spoiler.
Yeah. So he actually drives that original DB5 model from the 1969 movie in the new movie, and in this one it's bulletproof. but it is really cool. It's a very good movie. Check that out. This is also now a movie recommendation podcast. Actually, I will be touching on Ford versus Ferrari again because Aston Martin has a connection with them.
Oh, good. I still have not watched that, but it is still on my list. So
okay, cool. Yeah. So that's just a general gist on the Aston Martin brand. I know I'm skipping over 100 years of rich history, but we're obviously more focused on the Formula One side of it. But very cool cars. I would love to drive one day on Forza Horizon, a racing game on the Xbox. I use the Aston Martin Vantage a lot, so I'm a bit of an Aston Martin connoisseur myself. Before I get into the Aston Martin F1 team kind of history lead up, Megan, do you have any initial thoughts on the Aston Martin team, and do you know anything about in the past?
Ooh, see, if I had looked at a single thing, I probably would have refreshed my memory a bit. But I know Aston Martin was actually part of the most I know right now that I can think of off the top of my head without any coffee in me is that Aston Martin did used to sponsor Red Bull. And then a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, they switched.
Yeah, so they, as we will see, they are generally a new team. And I say generally because they did have an attempt to enter Formula One in the 50s and 60s. So currently they are in F1 as the Aston Martin Formula One team after a rebranding of the Racing Point F1 team. And Racing Point was a rebranding of Force India after I don't remember his name, but if you watch Drive to Survive, there's a couple episodes on it. Force India's owner essentially got caught scamming people, lying about his money. And a group of investors bought the team off him, changed it to Racing Point. 2 years later, Racing Point changed into Aston Martin. And we're going to see these rebranding of the teams as we get later into Lance Stroll. The rebranding of the teams ended up happening a lot in part because Lawrence Stroll, Lance's father, owned stakes in Racing Point and now Aston Martin. So Lance Stroll, who we'll get into later, he is another pay driver. Although, however, I will say he is probably the best one. So, so Aston Martin first entered F1 in 1959. This was before my dad was born, before my mom was born.
Same.
My grandpa was 28. So this was a while ago. And while I was doing research for their results back then, the articles I was reading would be oh, they finished 6th out of the points. So there was not a lot of teams back then. So it was a very, it was early F1. So their car was the DBR4, but this car's development was slowed down a lot and hampered by the prioritization of the DBR1. So the DBR1 had actually won the 24 hours at Le Mans in 1959. And they were hoping for similar success in F1, but by the time they stopped prioritizing the Le Mans endurance racing, their DBR4 car that debuted in 1959, it was already outdated and behind the rest of the field. But their debut race was the 1959 Dutch Grand Prix, and their drivers were Roy Salvadori and Carroll Shelby. So this is where the Ford versus Ferrari connection comes up.
Okay.
So Carroll Shelby Carroll Shelby is most famous for his work with Ford Motor Company on the Mustang. And to this day, the highest edition of the Mustang is called the Ford Shelby GT 500. So
Oh.
Carroll Shelby is like an American automobile like legend. Like he really took Ford to new heights, took the Mustang. Honestly, he turned the Mustang into what it is. And in Ford versus Ferrari, the movie is actually about Carroll Shelby and his driver, Ken Miles, being tasked by Henry Ford II to build the Ford GT40 to beat Ferrari at the 1966 24 Hours of Le Mans. And Carroll Shelby actually was a race car driver as well, as obviously he's racing F1. But in the 1959 Le Mans win that Aston Martin has, Carroll Shelby was one of the co-drivers. So I actually thought it was, one, really cool that Ford versus Ferrari came up again because I just brought it up. And two, that there's a lot of talk about getting Americans into Formula One and Americans into international motorsport right now. And it's really cool that even way back when, like possibly the most prominent American motorsport figure of the last like 40 years was a part of Aston Martin, which is a very British company.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I wonder if Ford would ever consider going back into international motor racing, just given their history and their past experience in Formula One.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely an interest in motor racing in general,
Hmm.
and because they're one of the three NASCAR car like
Hmm.
options. So in NASCAR, you either have a Mustang, you have a Camaro, or a Toyota Camry. I don't know how that got in there, but those are your like
That's
three options.
hilarious.
Yeah, so and they're obviously extremely modified versions of these cars.
Hmm.
But I mean, Mustang is very involved in NASCAR, and I think as F1 becomes more Americanized, I think we're going to see them maybe lob
Hmm.
some interest, maybe not as being like a title sponsor on a team, but like, you know, Ford powertrains, Ford power supply, you never know. So
Yeah.
they definitely have the history to back it up. Okay, before I went on my little tangent about Carroll Shelby, the debut race for Aston Martin Formula One team was the 1959 Dutch Grand Prix. Both drivers had to retire early with engine failure, which you never like to see. Throughout the rest of the season, they struggled a lot with like reliability, and when they did finish, like they struggled to score points like at all. The car was really, really outdated compared to the field. So in 1960, they built their next Formula One car, which is just the DBR5, which was based on the DBR4, which was that first car they built, but it was lighter and had an updated suspension. However, it had a heavy front engine where most of the cars had engines in the rear. And even now, if you look at like just civilian cars for like Ferrari, even like Corvettes, Lamborghini, stuff like that, they're all rear engined for a reason. So this car was updated, but the engine was in the front and it slowed it down like a lot. So they also had trouble competing in 1960, and they could not keep up with the more like modern engined cars. They did not score any points in F1 in those first 2 years, so they left F1 to focus on sports car racing. Uh, Fast forward like 40 years because they are not in the sport at all for a
Oh,
while.
wow.
So their first potential return does not come around until like the late 2000s. So like 2008, 2009. So they were granted spots as a potential new team, kind of how we're seeing right now with
Hmm.
Porsche and Audi.
Hmm.
They were granted potential spots in 2008 and 2009, but David Richards, their head at the time, said that they were a ways away from having a Formula One team. And he felt that the best way to succeed would to be to partner with an existing team. So from 2016 to 2020, they served as a sponsor for Red Bull. And from 2018 to 2020, they were actually the title sponsor. See, Megan, you got it.
Sick.
And actually, if you guys watch Drive to Survive or just any recaps of races from that time period, Aston Martin was the main sponsor on Red Bull's wing, so they were very visible on the car. Let's see, but obviously, Red Bull, I believe, has their own. They switched to Honda for a bit, and then they now actually have their own like powertrain.
I think they still have Honda for another year or two. Like it's not an actual. They had like the contract until 2023,
Okay.
I believe. So I think they still have the Honda unit, but they're not. No, they're no longer like a sponsor. Like I think it's just that, and then they're developing their own. We might have to look into that, but I think that's what I read at the end of the year because they were
Okay.
leaving as
Cool.
like
And
like a sponsor.
I'm sure we will go over that during our Red Bull episode too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so they were the title sponsor for 2 years for Red Bull, but we got the Aston Martin Formula One team in 2021. So January 2020, Lawrence Stroll, owner of Racing Point, or one of the owners of Racing Point at the time, put a funding investment into Aston Martin, taking a almost 17% stake in the company, which is a lot.
That's
like,
huge.
Obviously, he's not a majority owner, but like that's a lot of a company. So he owned 17% of Aston Martin, and that resulted in the rebranding of Racing Point to Aston Martin. We're gonna see this a lot throughout. Lance Stroll's career is that where he goes, his dad's money follows.
Yeah,
and
it has to.
it's weird. It's not weird. He's a pay driver, but it's interesting because he, from a young age, showed like a lot of potential. So obviously his dad wanted to support that, but he had a like pretty non-traditional path to F1, and a lot of it is due to his father's money, regardless of how good he showed he could be. So the 2021, that was when the Aston Martin F1 team came to be. They started with, Sergio Perez was under contract with them until 2022, but he was actually replaced by Sebastian Vettel, who came over from Ferrari. They switched their color from the pink of Force India and Racing Point to Aston Martin's British Racing Green, which I did not know that Britain has like an official racing like color, like a national color for racing.
I didn't either. That's
so it's like that like forestish green. Okay. And Aston Martin's color right now is like a modern take on that color.
Okay.
And I think to bring up Drive to Survive again, there's an episode where like they reveal the new color to Lawrence Stroll, and he's like, "Oh, this is money. Like this is good." Yeah. So it is a very nice color. I think they have one of the nicer color palettes.
Yeah. I do I prefer it than the pink, that's for sure. But I do like the pink with Alpine now with that blue. I think that's a fun pairing, but I did not care for Racing Points at all.
The super like bright pink on the car as the main color kind of made it feel like a billboard, if that makes any sense. Like, I don't know, but I wasn't like the biggest fan of it. But the pink with the blue is kind of nice.
Yeah, the pink with the main pink reminds me of those cars that you see on the freeway that just like are like a glaring, like you said, like a brand. So it's like the hot dog car that we have, or just like something that's like super teal blue and just has like big lettering all around it.
Yeah, so I think the color was a nice switch. But yeah, so they came into 2022 with this year with an unchanged driver lineup of Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. And their first podium as a team came in 2021 with a second place finish at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And we'll get into the drivers. I didn't go through too much of the team's history because they've only been a team for 2 years. And the drivers that we cover right now will kind of go over everything they've done as a team. But yeah, so started as Force India, then went to Racing Point, now Aston Martin. A lot to do with Lawrence Stroll owning part of Aston Martin. And say what you will about him, he brought Aston Martin back to F1, which I think is a pretty cool thing to do. And yeah, so we're gonna go through Lance Stroll, Sebastian Vettel. Megan's gonna do Seb. I'll do Lance. Which one do you want to do first?
We could probably go into Sebastian. All right. So I know there's been a ton of rumors too about, possible teams coming in and what the possibilities are. I know there's a few rumors of different drivers and stuff like that. So I want to hear your thoughts on Audi potentially coming into the Aston Martin team and taking over that, and Aston Martin potentially leaving again if they left.
Um, I I don't think I want to see Aston Martin leave.
Mhm,
And especially, so the two new teams coming in are Porsche and Audi.
mhm.
And they're both a Volkswagen. And I think it would suck to not kick out, but I think it would suck for such like a powerful company with like such a, maybe not in F1, but like such a rich history,
Mhm.
um, to leave F1 for a company that is already going to have another team for their more notable brand. Like obviously Audis are nice and it's got like a really big history, but
Mhm.
Porsche is more recognizable. And I think if Volkswagen's going to have a team, I think it should be Porsche.
Yeah.
And I think if, you know, maybe if Audi wants to get involved and not be the title sponsor, I think that would be cool. But I would like to see, my dream scenario is the Aston Martin team remains
Mhm.
with maybe new ownership and new direction and new drivers.
Mhm.
Because Seb, I'm gonna guess is probably gonna retire, and Lance Stroll I think needs to move on.
Mhm.
So I would like to see the Aston Martin team remain,
Mhm.
but it's probably hard to do if you're gonna lose your main funding, both your drivers maybe. Uh,
Yeah.
So I do think Audi will probably replace them, but I would
Yeah.
like to see them stay.
Yeah, I would like to see Aston Martin. I like the name. I think it's a great brand. I just, again, like you said, it's the direction they're going. The strategy, the structure of the team is just not there. And I think that the performance that happens this year will ultimately decide whether Sebastian leaves. And I think even though I don't want to see him leave, I think if he left and they were able to get rid of Lance, I think it would be a great refresh for the team and kind of save Aston Martin from having to leave again, because anytime they've been in Formula One, they haven't had the best experience. So it would be cool to see them kind of rebuild that brand back into Formula One and make them one of those top teams again, or just one of the top teams in general.
I would like to see them give it a shot without the pressure of, because Lawrence Stroll is a micromanager. Like
Oh,
he
100%.
he is like he
Terrifying.
wants to be involved,
Hmm.
and he's obviously only there because his son is.
Hmm.
And honestly, I saw people saying that Lawrence remains on Aston Martin, but Lance moves on to a different team. And I know Lance has been a pay driver up until this point, but I think he's good enough to have a seat on a different team. So
Yeah.
if there could be like some kind of split.
We could switch Mick and Lance, because Lance could, if they could still get him as a paid driver, or even just switch him over to Haas, because Haas could be a good development for Lance and an opportunity for him to show whether or not he like should be in Formula One.
Yeah,
And then I just also, Mick is obviously, whatever is happening at Haas maybe isn't the best situation for him, and him being paired with Seb, who's like his role model in the sport, other than his dad, would be maybe helpful for him.
I think that would be a great pairing because I mean Lance is like a pretty, in theory, is like
Mhm.
ready to go as a driver. Like we brag on him, but he's good. Like he can
Yeah.
drive. And the Haas car has shown it's not slow. So it'd
Hmm.
be a good opportunity for him to show what he is as a driver.
Hmm.
Um, Mick would be moving to Aston Martin, which might get bought by Audi, a German company. With
Hmm.
Seb and Mick, I think they would be a German driver pairing, right?
Yeah.
Seb is German, so I
Yeah.
think that would be good for that team. Whether it's Aston Martin or Audi, either way, be a fresh start kind of for everyone.
Hmm.
I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I do think any shuffling around is going to revolve around the Aston Martin team and the two new companies trying to come in.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so we can get into Sebastian Vettel then. So he is 34 years old. He's a German driver. He was born in July of 1987. A few fun facts about him. He's the only driver without any social media presence, which I thought was interesting. Like even Alonso's on Instagram.
Yeah.
But he's very big. And I also noticed I don't believe he has a manager either. And he's very into environmental issues and saving the planet. And that seems to be more of his not muse, but like focus, I guess, over recent years since leaving, especially since leaving Ferrari. But it has always been he's always been very vocal about it. Um, he is a four-time world champion. I'll go through more of the history soon, but just as like an overall gist, he was a four-time world champion. He won consecutively from 2010 to 2013 with Red Bull. And he's actually still the youngest driver to have won a championship. He was 23 years old when he won in 2010. So I actually thought that Max was the youngest winner, but Max was 24 years old when he won in December.
Okay.
So he said that his childhood heroes were the three Michael Schumacher, Michael Jordan, and Michael Jackson, which I thought was funny.
It's pretty good. I don't know how Michael Jackson fits in there for such a quiet guy. But that's good. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. He said he wanted to sing, but then realized he didn't have the voice for it. So
okay, that's fair. I mean, if you're comparing yourself to Michael Jackson, maybe not the best, but yeah, it's all right. We'll let it slide. I think his career worked out all right.
Yeah, he's doing okay with Formula One. But he was a test driver for BMW Sauber in 2006, and then in 2007, after Kubica's crash, he replaced him at the U.S. Grand Prix. So BMW Sauber actually is no longer a team. They left Formula One in 2009, just for financial reasons, and the team was just far behind. He was also the youngest driver at the time to score a point on the F1 grid. Then in 2007, for the remainder of the season, he was moved to Toro Rosso into the Red Bull Racing Driver Academy, which many Formula One drivers have been a part of. And then in the following 2008 season, he showed a strong potential to have a seat at Red Bull because he, just continued to make strides and show that he had grown as a driver very quickly. For example, at the Chinese Grand Prix in 2008, he was able to move from 17th place at the start of the race and moved up to 4th in very mixed conditions and quite close to getting on the podium. And at the time, he was, maybe 21, 20. So he showed, for a very young age. And you'll see that too in like a lot of the drivers now. But a lot of the younger drivers seem to be a little bit more daring, and he has that quality too.
Red Bull really has something with finding like the fastest driver they can at like 17 and just keeping them until they're ready.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, but now they have a little bit of a backup, I think, especially considering Sergio's probably staying for another 2 years. I would not be surprised.
No, yeah.
But then in 2008, he became the youngest driver, like I said, to win a Grand Prix. That title is now held by Max Verstappen. Max Verstappen won a Grand Prix at 18 years old when he joined Formula One, which is also super young.
That's insane. Holy shit.
Yeah. So Seb has quite a few titles, and I think there's a few more I'll get to. But during Seb's time at Red Bull, he scored both he has the record for most consecutive Grand Prix wins in a season and the most races won in a row. So he's won 9 in a row, which is a lot to win in a row. And then he's also won 13 Grand Prix in a season.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So even though we haven't seen significant points from Seb in a while, just given the car and reliability, back in 2011, he scored 392 points, which is like Lewis Hamilton quality, like level of points.
I think it's lost now in the post Lewis Hamilton, post Drive to Survive era, which is, what people see more of Formula One just because there's been more cameras on it. Seb is probably the best driver between Schumacher and Hamilton.
He is so Sebastian Vettel is such an underrated driver. And unless you look back into the history and like, if you're only focusing on Drive to Survive, you would never know that Alonso and Vettel were some of the most well-respected, well-loved, like quality drivers that could have won more Grand Prix and were so close to having that opportunity and didn't. Like Alonso could have probably won 2 or 3 more. And it's just like all circumstantial, and at the end of the seasons. But in America, we really didn't see a lot of these races. So drivers or fans in Europe might, know all this history about Vettel and follow him or like just, have oodles of respect. But in
Yeah.
America, like if you just see him on Aston Martin, you're like, this guy just needs to retire. Like, what's he doing?
Yeah. No, and like, I mean, winning the championships between like, I mean, the two best drivers ever with Michael Schumacher, and I know there was other drivers who won championships in there, but he won a good amount of them. Like that kind of happened in the NBA between Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Like there's like a dead gap in the middle of like players who are not maybe respected as much as they should be just because they were sandwiched by like the two best ever. And I feel like that happens a lot with Seb, with Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton. It's like those two were so dominant that you forget this guy won 4 World Driver Championships
in a row. Like that's huge. Yeah, there's only so many drivers who have won even more than 2 or 3 in a row, so I think, Seb doesn't necessarily get as much credit as he deserves, but I also think social media kind of plays a role into that too, because he has no social media presence. All you see is in his interviews. So unless you're on YouTube looking at his interviews, like you really don't have a reason to remember him or interact with him because he's not on your feed. But I just got into the marketing bit a little bit because that's my field.
He's not the most marketable.
No.
He's not what we would call a cash cow.
No. Okay, so then in 2015, Seb joined Ferrari and was paired with Kimi as the other driver. The two are actually still close friends today. It's fun to see them in interviews, and I know they still chat and probably see each other or whatever. Kimi Räikkönen, he retired last year, if you didn't know that already. But it was interesting for Seb and Ferrari because there were actually 2 different opportunities where he could have won the world championship again with Ferrari, which has always been a dream of his, not only to drive for Ferrari, but to also win a championship with them, just like Michael Schumacher did. And it was in 2017 and 2018. Vettel was runner up to Lewis Hamilton in both of those championships, which is another time where it's like you forget that unless you were really paying attention or following the sport at the time, because he was just sandwiched between other just top-notch drivers. But and then there is actually, I haven't seen too much, and I haven't been able to read too much on it, but if you've watched Drive to Survive, they paint Seb sometimes in a way that's like very like kind of like the kid that likes to stir trouble in class or kind of like pick fights or just kind of do his own thing or go his own way. For example, like when he was switching from Red Bull to Ferrari, he technically was on a contract with Red Bull through 2015, but they think it was non-binding after 2014, which is why he made the switch. And he actually wasn't approved to go to the Ferrari testing at the end of the 2014 season because he was still technically under Red Bull. But he went anyways. He didn't drive the car, but he was in the garage and still like there. So he didn't face any like backlash for it, I guess, from the team. But it just like goes to show that he kind of still just does his own thing. Hence, like him also not having a manager who helps in those negotiations with teams and helps him in, protecting contracts and stuff like that. It's just he kind of just does it on his own. So it's an interesting strategy that many of the drivers don't do, but I have a lot of respect for him for it.
I think it's pretty important to have a manager.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Especially right now when his contract's ending and there's a potential for him to not be in Formula One anymore. I think this would be kind of the time you'd want someone to have these conversations for you so you can focus on everything else. I mean, they've got a lot on their plate, so.
Yeah, oh my God. I couldn't imagine.
Yeah. And then in the 2019 and 2020 season for Ferrari, he had Charles Leclerc as his pairing. And this is kind of where Drive to Survive picks up too, because Charles Leclerc came in and everyone was like, okay, cool. So Charles Leclerc's the second driver. Vettel's going to teach him all these things. It's going to be great, whatever. And then Vettel ended up scoring behind Leclerc at the end of the 2019 and 2020 season, which was kind of like a lot. It took a lot of people aback, just given the fact that Vettel usually was always like the one ahead of his driver or his teammate. I think there's only one other time prior to that he had been behind a teammate in however many years he had been driving, 10, 12. So it kind of took a lot of people by surprise, and that's ultimately, I think, why Ferrari decided to let him go. And Vettel, I think, had made peace with that at the time because he recognized that Leclerc was signed on to be their number one, and because Leclerc had been performing a little bit better and a little bit more consistently, even though they did not have a consistent car in those 2 years. I think it ultimately was the best decision, and he was able to then go to Aston Martin in 2021 or 2021. And since joining Aston Martin, he did have that podium at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in 2021. It was their first podium for the team, which is really exciting. And he was in points at this last Grand Prix at Imola. So even though he's been in points and has shown, he can still perform over these last 2 years, the Aston Martin car has just been wildly unreliable. And I think, like I said earlier, I think the rest of this year will really determine whether or not he decides to stay or not. I don't see him going to another team. I kind of think it's this or nothing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I do want to say, too, that he doesn't just do Formula One. He has competed in other races before. He's most known for doing the Race of Champions, which I actually watched this year. It was very fun. He was paired up with Mick for the 2022 season. So they were up in Sweden and they raced kind of in these snow and ice tracks and in these tiny little go-kart cars almost. And they just race along these crazy laps and have to pretty much beat the other team. And then it's kind of like a bracket where it just slowly, goes into the final. Him and Mick were runner-up for this year, but he used to compete in race of championships with his dad, Michael Schumacher, and they competed in 2007, 2008, and 2012, and they won all 3 of those years.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, I really like when the F1 drivers do different stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's cool because it's nice. One, it's interesting to see how they do in other sports, and it's also nice that they have the time and flexibility. Because I know drivers like Daniel Ricciardo, he really likes the motorcycle kind of. I forgot what the actual name is, but the bikes. He really enjoys those, and so it's a way for them to kind of do the things that they used to enjoy, or maybe don't have as much time to do. And then to Alex Albon, he was competing in other races outside of Formula One. And I think that helped him to be able to come back into the sport because he still had the familiarity of being in a car.
Yeah, no, definitely. And these are competitive people. They will do anything to compete in motorsport. And I think you're thinking of motocross, right?
Yes, thanks.
Okay.
It's early. But yeah, so that was all I had on Seb, though. I'm very interested to see how the rest of the year plays out. I, of course, don't want him to leave. I would love to see him in for another 1 or 2 years, 2 or 3 years, 4 years. But I think it really just depends. I don't think he's done in motorsport at all. I think he, would plan to do something else if it's not Formula One. But I definitely don't think his time is over yet.
Yeah, no, I think he's still got some. I think he's still got some racing in him. He, despite the car, he hasn't been doing horrible this year.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I mean, well,
he has awful luck, but
he has awful luck. But his first real race back, he did pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, if he hadn't had all the car issues in Australia, it probably would have been a better result for him. It was more just testing at that point. And then he was obviously sick with COVID for the first 2 races. So
2 races.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see Miami too, because Miami's kind of a blank canvas for everyone, given the fact that no one's raced on it really before. So it'll be interesting to see how each driver does. I'm sure Perez will be up there, and any other driver that does well in the climate that they'll be driving in.
Yeah, no, definitely. Very good driver. Pretty cool guy from what we can see of him.
Yeah.
I hope he sticks around for a couple more years. All right. We just went over Sebastian Vettel. We are now moving on to Lance Stroll. Full name Lance Strolovich. Did not know that. He is 23 years old. I did not think he was that young.
I thought he was 25. I thought he was our age, to be honest,
Yeah,
or
I thought he was
26 or
our
something.
age too, because he's been in the sport for a while, and
Yeah.
you will shortly see why. So he is a Canadian Belgian driver, drives under the Canadian flag. Canada left the FIA a couple years ago, so he
Oh,
drives under an American license, but still under the Canadian flag every
okay.
weekend.
That's
I
like
believe.
Latifi too, but I don't remember what
Yes.
his license is under.
I think Latifi. So Latifi is half Canadian, half something, and I think the something is what his license is under.
Okay. That makes sense.
I forgot already.
Okay.
So yeah, he has previously, before Aston Martin, driven for Williams and Racing Point, which Racing Point is just Aston Martin repurposed. He began karting at age 10, which is later, like
Yeah.
Latifi.
Mhm.
And he is a pay driver. We've gone over pay drivers a couple times. Latifi was one. Zoe is another. We'll get to him in one of our later episodes. But just to touch up on it again, he not entirely, but he has his seat because he brings the team financial backing. And this is a trend we're going to see with Lance Stroll throughout his career, with most pay drivers throughout their career. I will say off the bat, he can drive, and he has shown a lot of potential.
Yeah. He can't check his mirrors, that's for sure. But
who can? Who among us can't? He can drive. He has shown a lot of potential. I think he should be in F1, but he has been provided the opportunity to maybe cut some corners by his money. So, we'll get into it. So his path F1 started in F4. His car racing debut was I just skipped something. Let me move right back. Let me just touch on karting real quick.
Okay, go for it.
He won the Sport Automobile de Quebec Rookie of the Year award and Driver of the Year in 2019 or 2009. I'm sorry. And then in 2010, he became a member of the Ferrari Driver Academy. So he made his car racing debut in the 2014 Florida Winter Series, which this was a non-championship series organized by the Ferrari Driver Academy. He raced against Latifi, Max Verstappen. And in that series, he got 2 podiums and then a pole at Homestead, Miami, which I believe Homestead, Miami is a NASCAR race as well. Yeah. And then he made his competitive debut in the 2014 Italian F4 Championship. He drove from a power team. He was the series champion with 7 wins, 13 podiums, and 5 poles. Like I said, this guy can drive. He can drive. He is good. So he then moved to F3. So Stroll in F3 won the New Zealand Toyota Racing Series in 2015, 4 wins and 10 podiums in 16 races.
Okay.
He was the 2015 FIA F3, or he raced in the 2015 FIA F3 European Championship with Prema Power Team, which by this point his father owned a part of.
Nice.
Yeah. So in 2015, he announced that he was leaving the Ferrari Driver Academy to test drive for Williams. In 2016, he actually finished 5th at the 24 Hours at Daytona. It was an endurance race. I like when I see that these drivers do something else besides Formula racing. I like to mention it. And then he remained with Prema Power Team for his second season of F3. He won 14 races, including the last 5. He won the title with 4 races to go and was 187 points ahead of second place. Again, he can drive. Okay. He can drive. He has talent.
Surprising me.
Here is the issue. His next season, he was a Formula 1 driver. He just skipped F2.
That's like the rite of passage for Formula 1 is F2 for pretty much every driver.
So in 2017, he was one of the two drivers for the Williams team. He was the first Canadian F1 driver since the 1997 World Driver Champion, Jacques Villeneuve. Ahead of Stroll making his debut for Williams, his father paid Williams $80 million. So that is why he got his seat.
I'll ever have $80 million.
Here's my issue is that he could have had like the traditional path to F1 and he would have made it on his own merit because he can drive. Like he can drive.
It's not like Latifi where like Latifi needs the money to be in it and it's not even that worth it anymore.
If he was just patient like the rest of these guys, he would have made it to F1. Like I feel very
and he
confident.
might have been better. He might have been better because maybe it was too soon to enter Formula One and now he's been in it for like 4 or 5 years and he sucks. Like not sucks, but like kind of. I mean, he's making those rookie mistakes still, like not looking in the mirror and crashing into Latifi and not holding himself accountable or taking any responsibility for his crashes. So
like you said, with F2 kind of being a rite of passage, that is where a lot of drivers fine tune their skill before they get into a Formula One car. Like we've said before, F1 cars are the most advanced fast cars in the world. And jumping from F3 to just F1 is nuts.
Yeah.
Like you're missing on so much race experience. You're missing on just so much maturity in getting through F2 and like proving yourself and stuff like that. Once again, something I think he would have done. He had shown up until that point that he was on the path, but his father's money allowed him to take a shortcut.
Yeah.
Dang. So yeah, 2017, he debuted for Williams. He was crashing a lot at first. He crashed during practice of his first Grand Prix, the Australian Grand Prix.
Mazepin move.
Yeah. So his first race finish was the Russian Grand Prix, and he actually finished 11th despite spinning out on the first lap. So again, has potential. He can drive. Everything else about him is infuriating.
Yeah.
So he scored his first points at his home race in Montreal, finishing in 9th place. At the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, he ran in second for a lot of the closing laps, but then was actually passed by Valtteri Bottas like right before the finish line. I think they actually showed that on Drive to Survive. I might be mixing it up with something else.
I know they showed that situation happening. I don't know if it was that one or a different one, but I definitely know it happened.
So he was running in second, got passed last second by Bottas, but he became the youngest rookie and second youngest driver behind Max Verstappen to podium in F1. He was 18 years old and 239 days.
I always love that they do the days.
Yeah. He finished the year in 12th in the World Driver Championship, scoring 40 of Williams' 83 points. That is a very good debut year. Obviously, late 2010s, Williams' car was a little faster than not a little. It was a lot better than it was now. Like they were not a top team, but they had a pulse. So
a pulse.
Yeah. So yeah, the car allowed him to show that he had potential even after his initial like run of bad luck. So 2018, he was paired with Sergei Sirotkin. They had the slowest car in the field that year. This is kind of where we start to see that Williams downturn. Very, very documented on Drive to Survive.
Yeah.
Like you get a lot of Williams episodes and they're not an easy watch. So their team that year finished last in the constructors. But Stroll did score the team's first points again at Azerbaijan. This is a good Grand Prix for him. He finished in 8th, but he finished the Drivers' Championship in 18th, scoring 6 of the team's 7 points. So bit of a step back the next year. So if you watch Drive to Survive, I think this is season 2 of it, season 1 or 2. You show the pressure mount from Lawrence Stroll, Lance's dad, on taking his money elsewhere if the Williams car cannot compete. And by the end of the season, we see that the next year, 2019, he will be switching to Racing Point. So Lance Stroll switches to Racing Point. The team was bought from Force India by just a group of investors, including Lawrence Stroll. Once again, he goes where his father's money goes, or it's, the other way around, chicken or the egg, whatever you want to call it. So he replaced Esteban Ocon, and he raced alongside Checo for the year. He scored his first points at the season opener, the Australian Grand Prix, finishing 9th. Mm-hmm. At the German Grand Prix, he made it past Q1 for the first time after 14 straight Grand Prix not getting out of Q1.
Oh, wow.
He finished 4th at that race. His next points after that came at the Belgian Grand Prix. He finished 10th, and he finished the season with 21 points to Checo's 52. This is quick aside. I know he has not been like a World Driver Championship contender, but Checo is like really good.
Yeah.
So 2020, Stroll and Checo were retained. First points of the season came at the Styrian Grand Prix. He finished in 7th with a move Daniel Ricciardo took a lot of exception to. And this is where we'll kind of start to see those like newbie mistakes that someone in F1 would normally have out of their system just by race experience. But he actually had a string of point finishes at the Hungarian, Spanish, and then his second F1 podium at the Italian Grand Prix. After 8 races that season, Stroll was actually 4th in the World Drivers' Championship, but then had a string of retirements after that. But he did have his first pole position at the Turkish Grand Prix after a very wet qualifying. He led 32 of the 58 laps, but then fell to 9th due to a tire graining issue. And after the race, they actually saw he ended up having damage on his wing. So that's kind of what caused all his problems. And then at the Sakir Grand Prix, Mercedes had some tire issues, and Stroll ended up getting his 3rd F1 podium. And then 2021, as we went over before, Racing Point rebranded as Aston Martin. Stroll got partnered with Sebastian Vettel. He qualified and placed 10th in their opening race, and then finished 7th at the Italian Grand Prix. But his best finish that year was the Qatar Grand Prix, 6th place. Finished 2021 13th in the World Drivers' Championship, scoring 34 of Aston Martin's 77 points. Now we have this year. Been a pretty rough start to the year for him. Been a rough start to the year for Aston Martin in general. They're a team very much up in the air right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that they're worse than the Williams, but they are definitely not consistent or reliable. So it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward. Like, I'm very excited to see them at Miami. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy for Stroll. I was surprised when I saw him in 10th last weekend, as we talked about, but I really did not know that he had been doing so well for so long, or like in his earlier career. I thought it was more of like a Latifi situation where he was fine, and then he just had money, and so then he made it. But that's actually
I think the shortcuts he got to take due to his dad's money robbed him of the necessary experience of an F1 driver.
I agree.
And every level is hard, but breaking from F2 into F1 is tough, and he didn't even have to do that. I don't know what's next for him. I don't know what's next for the team, Aston Martin in general. Might know more in the coming months. What do you think?
Man, it's hard. I think I don't see his dad letting him go for another team without him, because I genuinely don't think a team at this point would accept him without the money. Because if he had gone through Formula 2 and showed his experience a little bit more, maybe they would consider him, and like he could have shown himself. But I don't think he's done enough in Formula 1 for a team to have a reason to take him without the money. With that though too, I don't know. I mean, I just think there's so many other drivers who've been in Formula 2 and should have been in Formula 1 or 2 years ago already, like Nick DeVries, Callum Elliott, Oscar Piastri. There are so many drivers that deserve Formula One seats, or at least deserve the opportunity.
Yeah.
And then there are drivers like Lance who've been in it for 5 years and are still just not there. So it would be, I wish we could just like put them all like at a race, like, like from start to finish and just go. And then whoever wins gets the seat. But I know that won't happen.
And that's a good example. Like a lot of, like, we've gone through a couple of like these driver team episodes. Nick DeVries is a good example. I think every driver, like beside like every younger driver we've covered so far, has had like some kind of like intense battle with him at some point or another, and that just shows like he can drive, but he's just kind of stuck.
Yeah,
in
stuck
F2.
in Formula E. Yeah,
no,
he's in Formula E.
Yeah. Like he can drive. These guys have been battling with him for a while. He probably deserves a seat in F1, but for other reasons, he has not gotten it. And that's, I think Nick DeVries is like a perfect example of the kind of steps that Lance Stroll got to skip, Again, as far as paid drivers go, he is the best one I can remember in the last however many years.
Yeah.
Does not mean he is like incredible. He has an attitude problem.
Oh, 100%. He's so annoying.
Yeah, he has like an attitude problem. He's very rude to his team. Yeah. And I don't know what he's like behind closed doors. Maybe he's a nice guy, but I have never gotten like the best impression of him. Honestly, I think his dad is more charming than he is.
100%.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little indifferent one way or the other what happens.
I know. It sucks because like I do think he could have that potential, and it would be cool to see him stay, just given the fact that I feel like he could do better maybe in 2 or 3 years, but at the same time there are just so many other drivers that I think deserve it more. So I would be very much okay with him not in that. I just, of all the drivers, like I have no opinion really on him because he just doesn't seem that exciting. Outside the track. But
yeah, no, he doesn't. But yeah, that covers Aston Martin, that covers Seb, that covers Lance Stroll. Do we have any parting thoughts, parting questions for the group?
Parting thoughts and parting questions. Well, what are your predictions for Miami?
Predictions for Miami. Checo podium. Max and Leclerc have their first like race.
Someone I just saw someone say Max and Leclerc DNF. They crash, they fuck each other, like the race up,
I don't know if I go as far as DNF, but I think they've been playing nice all year. I think they have their first like race,
like battle. Yeah.
Yes. I think the McLarens will do well. And I think bounce back week for Lewis. Anything is going to be better than last week.
Yeah.
I think Checo podium, Max and Leclerc, probably the other 2 spots, but they like go at it. And I think a McLaren and a Mercedes get top 5.
Yeah. I think Lewis top 5, Perez podium, and both Haas in points. Those are my
both Haas in points. Okay.
Both Haas. Mick and Latifi are the only 2 without points so far, which is embarrassing. Yeah, so
what if the track's a little humid and Mick spins out?
We don't have to jinx it. No, I'm just saying. He's gonna be up there. He's gonna be ahead of Magnussen. It's going to be.
I wouldn't go that far.
Okay, maybe not. I
think you can score points behind or instead or without being ahead of Kevin. I actually think Kevin will do pretty well.
I think so too. He's had a good season so far.
Yeah, you know what I want to see? I want to see a Bottas and Kevin Magnussen battle for like 6th place. They're both just stuck in like 6th and 7th all year.
That's how they've been all season so far, really. So
you know what? A couple of weeks ago we asked who the most random race winner was going to be. I'm changing mine. It's not going to be Albon. It's going to be Valtteri Bottas.
Oh yeah.
He has been, I don't know if you've noticed, like 2-3 weeks in a row now, there's been just like a clump of cars like going back and forth, and they're racing so hard, they're slowing each other down, and Bottas just comes in and sneaks past them.
I know. He's awesome.
So I am changing I think there's going to be a weird penalty, weird yellow, red flag, and Bottas is going to win a race this year.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, yeah, I could see that for sure. I mean, I could definitely see it more than Albon winning. To be
Albon
honest,
would have to catch a red flag with like 2 laps left.
he's gonna need like the first half of the grid, like in the back. Like they're gonna need one of those races. I think there was a race last year. I can't remember where, but it was like 6 cars just like suddenly started like going into each other. He needs like one of those situations, and just the underdog who comes forward.
But yeah, I think it'll be cool. I did not realize the Miami Grand Prix is not in Miami.
Wait, what? Where is it?
It is the Miami, the city did not want the race there. So they have it in like a suburb outside. It's literally in the middle of nowhere.
Oh, isn't it at the stadium?
I don't think so. Like,
I thought they built it around the
maybe
Dolphins.
It's like in the middle of nowhere, and they're making like a fake marina.
I saw the fake marina. That is hilarious.
Yeah,
that is a very American thing to do.
It's because they're not in Miami is off the beach.
Yeah.
They're not off the beach. Like they're like 30 minutes in, I think.
That's freaking funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
We'll see. Our Miami recap episode is up in the air when that will get to you guys.
Yeah. Don't count on it being the day after. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it might come late, which that'll be fine. One episode. I don't think either of us really thought it
spring break season, so
yeah, we've got places to go.
Yeah, things to do.
But yeah, I think we can probably wrap up there.
All right.
Yeah, we'll talk to you guys. When do we want to post this episode?
Well, I'll be out, so it's really whenever we could post it either Monday or Wednesday. I feel like those are our days.
Here's me out. Since our I already forgot the city, Miami, since our Miami Grand Prix is going to be late. Yeah. Why don't I post this next Thursday? So there's like a little buffer.
Leeway.
Yeah, we're not going like 2.5, not 2.5 weeks, but we're not going 2 weeks without an episode.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Cool. Okay, so this will be up Thursday. Yeah, we'll talk to you guys then.
Awesome.
All right. See ya.
Bye.